On this week's The Next Interview, you'll hear Walker Thrash explain exactly how great leaders simplify complexity, build trust across teams, and turn the hardest projects into their greatest wins.
Great leaders don't guess where their systems break, they measure it. Grab the Empowerment Blueprint Toolkit to find your leadership blind spots and build real momentum. Download now at thenextinterview.com.
Welcome to the Next Interview Show podcast. And as the announcer mentioned when we came through the front door, I'm Doland White. I am the host of the podcast, and I'm blessed. I'm always honored to have amazing guests on the podcast. And today, I have a gentleman with me named Walker Thrash with me, and we're going to spend some time talking about his book, leadership, his business, Southern. We may throw some Southern slang in there here or there just as a test, just to make sure that we're in sync with each other. And just as a very first thing, Walker, is just always starting in with gratitude. There's a million other things you could be doing and a lot of other places you could be and other people you could be spending time with. And you're going to hang out with me for 30 minutes, although it won't end up 30 minutes, but you're going to hang out with me. And I just want to tell you thank you for being here and for helping me further my mission and helping the leaders that are listening to the podcast become better at what they do. So thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. This will be fun.
Yeah, good. If it's not fun, we shouldn't be doing it.
There you go.
So before we talk about the book and kind of what you do, I know that, you're an entrepreneur. I have my crib notes here on my screen, entrepreneur, managing partner of Vertikal, even though it's spelled differently than Vertical. It'll be in the show notes, and a founding partner of the Origin Hotel brand. But there's a lot that goes into that path to become that person. And so I'd like to maybe just take a couple of minutes and give you some space to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into talking about leadership and families and all the stuff that we do.
Sure. I appreciate the open space there. So I guess if I go back, I started young. I was in my early 20s getting into real estate. I remember the very first real estate venture I did was a failed residential project that involved an auction of lots. Right. So
wow.
kind of a high pressure situation for a 23-year-old. I was involved and then in and out, worked with my family business over a period of years, was on my own for a period of years, and then really started to hone in on the design build portion of development. Vertikal, though spelled with a K, is the symbolism of that is we do have a pretty vertically integrated team, right? So it goes from development to construction, so people train in civil engineering, sales, but the idea is that we can wrap our hands around a project and bring it to fruition from the early meeting, to full delivery. And we just seem to focus on independent boutique hotel, and then also a lot of multifamily for sale residential, not because those two things have anything to do with each other. It's just, those were challenging projects for city, the master developers to put together. Yeah. So we found ourselves in the position of somewhat being creative problem solvers. And those were the problems in the master development deals or with the city's intent for, a mixed use urban setting. So we just gravitated toward the product that we thought we could help solve.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think one of the things that, just as you were kind of going through there, I will warn you, I will write stuff down as you're going.
Sure.
One of the things so it's interesting kind of as you're talking about that, and I think it's a good lesson for people. There's easy paths and then there's not quite so easy paths. And tip of the hat to you at 23 for stepping off the curb and going and doing this. That's a lot to step into at 23, man.
It was fun. I'm not averse to risk. I think it's an inherent problem.
Yeah, and for the little bit that we talked about before we hit go on the podcast, I can understand you can't be averse to risk with what you're doing at all. If you are, you will You will not sleep. So yeah, so I understand that. But one of the things I think that's interesting that I think maybe we just take a minute and just kind of chat about is you stepped into and made a decision to focus on things that were challenges rather than kind of focusing on, hey, let's go, and there's an easier thing we can go develop over here, and let's just go do that, right?
Sure.
So what kind of drug you? What was the gravity that kind of pulled you towards that decision? Why challenges?
Yeah. Well, I would say we've developed projects in a lot of urban markets and in some of the markets we're in. I mean, I live in South Boulder. We've done a fair amount of work in the Denver, Boulder area, Austin,
Sure.
Raleigh, some of these different metro areas, very liquid markets, a lot of competition, right?
Mhm.
A big believer in figuring out how you can differentiate. And it just so happened, look, there were less people circling the harder deals, right? So less competition, let us have a little more time to coalesce around the projects, bring the teams together, try to figure out a winning strategy. And then, what happens is, like any business, becomes a word of mouth conversation.
Sure.
One project leads to another, then all of a sudden you look up 5 years later and 100% of the projects you're working on are public-private projects. That was not originally by design. That the
Yeah.
impetus for going after the first couple of projects was simply that, hey, we thought we could deliver a better overall product than the competition. And then you start to develop expertise, and then you start to do more projects that are similar. I do. Just sometime you look in the rearview mirror and realize, this wasn't the original plan, but here we are.
It's funny. One of the things when I coach, I remind people all the time around what you think the plan is won't be. Where you think you're going, there's a saying that I have taught my sons, which is, the more detail, the more time you put in on creating that plan, the more God laughs at you. So,
Yeah, I don't make long range plans anymore.
so there's I want to talk about one of the things that you just talked about, because I think it's really important for leaders, and since that's what I focus on.
Sure.
And you are one, by the way, as you lead your organization and your family and all that stuff. One of the things that you talked about was differentiation. And I think in any organization, leaders have a tendency, sometimes there is this concept, I think, Walker, around, what got me here can get me to the future.
Right.
And you were talking about in the different markets, and they were a little, because they're fluid and things going on, and a lot of people kind of circling around the easy stuff. So you pick the hard stuff to do. And as you stepped into that gave you differentiation that built your brand, right? Built word of mouth, and now builds a thriving business for you. So what kind of it's a 9-pound front end to the one question.
Sure.
When you're in that mode, I mean, it's easy to kind of say, I'm just going to take the easy path. I'm going to go this way rather than do something hard. How do you set your mind as the leader, because you set the inspiration behind this path, this strategy, and then going to keep everybody wrapped with you in that, so it becomes you co-create that result you're moving towards.
Oh, you're right. That's a loaded question. So I
Yeah.
would think, to kind of peel that back. One, and this is most important to me, you gotta build a good team, right? I mean, our company is very much more than me, negotiating and working on deals within the boardroom. It's developing, it's construction, it's trying to execute timelines. Real estate development's a very imperfect science. And as soon as you feel like you've got your schedules and budgets under control, something happens. I always say in a deal, my wife will ask me, what is it that you think is going to go sideways here? And I say, I have no idea in this particular project. I just know it's going to happen. Right? In every project, there's some new anomaly, something you got to tackle, a problem you got to solve. And within, like I said, start with team and the construct there. Without the right team, you just can't tackle these projects in general. But past that, I think one of the things is we really try not to compromise on what the overall objective is. So we're very much a design forward group. I think that's an attraction kind of when you speak about differentiation. And that's just subjective. I just tend to like good design. We want to work on projects that we like to walk away from at the end of the day. And we're not interested in putting the 3-4 years into a project that it takes to fully deliver it if it's something we're not comfortable saying, hey, yeah, look, we developed that. So there has to be a bend of fun to it, or the team gets off the train pretty quick, right? So all of that momentum headed in one direction, which is trying to deliver ultimate product in those deals, and just the nature of the projects that we do. They're complex. There's going to be problems. And I think a slight differentiator for us may just be the mentality with which we take on those problems, right? We're expecting them. They're going to happen. Part of what I think our value to the equation is we're going to deal with those problems. We're going to bring you the solution we feel like is best, or more importantly, we're going to bring you the problem we feel is most important. And let's sit around a table and figure that one out together. Here's some ideas, but this isn't our show completely, right? In the public-private partnership, you're just never acting alone. That can add some challenges for time, and pace. But with handled delicately and bringing people into the conversation with you, it's kind of that, what is it? The old military saying about slow is steady, steady is fast. I know I misquoted. It's a bad paraphrase, but there's some truth to that. If you take a nice steady pace through the project and our momentum is always heading forward, we don't get in a rush, but we definitely have deadlines and schedules we're trying to hit. But you're just trying to bring the team along with you. And if they're engaged, they feel like they're in real time understanding where you are in the project, things just go more smoothly.
Yeah.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. There
you go. Perfect. That's it too, by the way.
All right. Came back.
They're close enough. There you go. So and it's interesting you mention it, because I think that's an important lesson for leaders in any business, is that anticipate that there are going to be challenges and conditions and circumstances, and there's things you're going to come into the way, whenever you're in the project. It's funny because I had a conversation with a CEO the other day, and we were chatting, and he was a little frustrated by some of the obstacles that he was running into. And I mentioned to him that, without these obstacles, fundamentally, you're sitting in your car in a parking lot without the engine running.
Right.
Just kind of waiting for somebody to tow you away. So, thank goodness you're out driving down the road. So I love your thinking around that. And leaders, as listeners to the podcast, go back and listen to that, because I really think there's some good insights there around knowing that there's going to be contingencies and taking them on with the right mindset.
Yeah, and you got to bring people around with you. Otherwise, you run fast enough, you get far enough out in front, you're standing in the darkness by yourself, right? Everybody's looking to say, hey, get back here. Let's figure this out. Look, that's part of working through projects, understanding, getting some experience, and really trying to work at the pace of the deal, constantly involving the pressure of moving it forward, but just working at the pace of what people are comfortable with.
Yeah, love that. I think if, one of the other lessons that comes out of there, Walker, that you talked about is the idea about building the right team. I admire, so I grew up in construction, around it and in it. And although I'm not allowed to do it around the house anymore, my wife has banned me from anything.
Good idea.
Probably. I'm not allowed on ladders. Don't touch it. Don't do anything. Although I'm really good at demolition. That's my favorite. Give me a 5-pound sledge and I'm good to go. But one of the things that I do kind of want to touch on is, you talked about having the right people around you. And then we'll shift on, because I want to talk about your book and some of the things I read in your book.
Sure.
And I think in all organizations, leaders tend to think of the right people around you in the domain of those who are my direct employees. These are the people that work for me. I'm building the team there. But you also build a team outside of that body of people. and in particular in construction, when you're doing multi-cities and, without knowing all the details of your process and your business, how do you look for building that? I call it that trusted relationship. How do you build that trusted relationship in the body of your team inside of Vertikal, and then in those that you partner with? And because if you're doing public-private, you're crossing timelines and different people and schedules and complexities and
Sure. I tell you what, I'll take that one in two parts. So I think team internal, and there's no equation for this, but at some level, the quality of your team directly relates to the amount of time you spend managing that team. And we pride ourselves on being small, nimble, taking the challenges as we get them. But I would say we're as flat an organization as you're going to find. So it's not a hierarchical deal, right? Because I want my team empowered to be able to make decisions in the field or office. And if I'm not needed in that decision-making process because they understand that problem better than I do, or what the solution needs to be, and we don't need to spend the time, we don't, right? And you build that trust over time. I mean, that's not a first day kind of conversation. But then as you build the team outside, and I think that's the more delicate conversation about how do you adequately build a team that is not your direct employee. And I think if you want to hone in on, obviously that's several different facets to that, but one I think that's super important is you do need to understand what your authority is in the process. And by that, I mean, you have to be willing to say, let's just I'll take this, I'm an anecdote kind of guy. So walk into a boardroom, and this is a true story. So I've walked into a boardroom, there's, typical city manager, economic development, the typical players around the front end of a project that you're talking about. As soon as I walk in, there's a young lady, sharply dressed, and keep in mind, I'm in South Boulder, so half the people are in jeans, t-shirt. It was a different vibe. Yeah. She might as well have had consultant stamped on her forehead, right? You just knew that was her role in the meeting. And damn it, she was going to be the consultant, right? I could tell it was going to be a little contentious right out the gate. Yeah. So she says, and we've got a long pro forma built on this project already. And she says, I think I can see someone miscalculated these permit fees. And you got to understand the permit fees as a percentage of this deal are just a tiny, infinitesimally small piece of what we're talking about that day. Right. So I can argue with her, right, and say, oh, well, wait, let's get into the math. I'm probably going to be wrong anyway in that discussion if she's come that prepared for the meeting. Or I can cede that to her and say, look, you're probably right. Let's get together after this meeting. Let's look at that. I'm sure you've done the math and it's accurate. That's your lane. What I want to talk about, though, is the importance of the margin we're trying to make on this project. And let's get right into that, right? She's comfortable because I haven't, kicked her out of the discussion. I validated, as a matter of fact, okay, look, that is an issue we need to look at. Right. But it's just not the most important issue today. And our authority in this conversation is how do we make this deal profitable? Right. That's a nuanced piece of the deal making process in public private, but it's such an important part. I mean, we all want to feel like we have our own autonomy in these discussions. Yeah. We're ultimately, no matter how old you are, we're all kids that get kicked out of our parents' house at some point. We're looking for somebody to say, hey, good job. And the moment we pretend like people aren't human and that's not part of the deal, you're making a mistake.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I had to smile when you said that, because I would go visit my dad. My dad's long since passed away, but I'd visit him in Dallas. And every time I'd show up in my 40s, 50s, and early 60s, he would have a list of chores for me. So I'd walk through the front door and I'd get my list of chores and I'd just do my chores. It's just I'm trained. I was trained to do that. So I love that comment around. We're all just kids that got kicked out. But I think it's right. It's funny because everybody people in those scenarios, I think a lot, as a leader, there's that propensity to want to leap to defend, and
Right.
what do you mean the numbers are wrong? And I like your comment, Walker, around moving to the important part, which is to give her recognition, to acknowledge her. That's great and that's important what you mentioned, but let's get on to this other topic, and then basically move the conversation back to center.
Well, and in that, I mean, like you said, you can create confrontation, we can debate. There's plenty of time for that, right? But
Yeah,
ultimately, we've got to be on the same side of the equation because we're all working toward the end result of a deal. And as soon as you start drawing lines between people, you're really just creating problems for yourself.
yeah,
That's a fact.
yeah. It's funny, yeah, because it's hard to move past those lines. And one of the things I think that I like how your conversation about how you approach that, because conflict is going to occur no matter what you do, because it's the definition, when I talk about the definition of a company, is it's merely a collection of people in relationships. It's a bunch of people together and everybody's got their perspective and their moments in lives that they're living through. And when you conflict will occur, it's the elegance, it's the nuance of how you manage that conflict, of what you do to move back and stay centered.
Yeah, I would even say in the nature of the more complex the project or the deal becomes, the more you need to go find that conflict, ferret it out, and understand where the problems are. And that's when you talk about the nuances, that's where you really do. There's like a fork in the road. You can either hang a right and let's debate it, let's see who's right, or you can hang a left, say, hey, let's look at this from the same side of the table. Explain to me exactly what you're saying and how you're thinking about that, and let's talk through it. It's the same conversation, just a much different vessel you're delivering it in. And God, that's an important piece. I mean, especially when you're talking about in public-private projects that we do, oftentimes money is not the central discussion point, right? Sometimes in the private deals, that's where you start. Public-private, it's more about execution. Do we have the right team? Can we deliver on this promise we've now made to the public? And even more critical that you've got a team rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I used to pre-gray hair guy, and hair used to be black. At one point, all this was black. But one of my favorite things in having conversations, and I carried a bag for years and worked with people on large, complex projects. And it's funny you mentioned money, because the conversation, I always started the conversation with, money is going to exchange hands. Money is part of what we're doing. But if we don't understand what it is we're trying to solve or trying to build, the money doesn't matter. There's not enough money to pay for that pain. So let's get that right. And then the money is that's an easy conversation.
Yeah. And money becomes, it should become an objective criterion in the overall project.
Agreed.
And the more objective you can make that discussion about the money, the less important it becomes in the overall deal.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like you take all of the mystique out of that conversation. We're not going to browbeat each other. We're not going to split the difference. We're not going to do all of that. Let's just understand the objective rules around, hey, why do we feel like this is the right valuation? And let's come to a consensus on what the objective criterion is. I mean, you really can deflate that whole conversation pretty quickly.
Yeah. I love that. And that's a lot of leaders get hung up on that whole conversation around money. And it's like, just do that now, do it up front, do it easy, and move on to what's really important.
Truly, one thing we try to start with in any conversation is, let's light the room on fire first. Let's understand what we're getting excited about. Let's understand this overall concept. What do we love about it? Then we can discuss how this is going to be financed. That's a much more complicated conversation than who's paying how much for what. But if you don't start, I mean, the world is built on sales, no matter how you want to talk about it, right? Between leadership, management, somewhere underneath that, sales is always coming into play. And if you, at your own peril, walk into a meeting and start with money, you're going to have a tougher conversation than
Oh
starting
my
and
gosh.
thinking, hey, I'm going to light the senses up and talk about what we're trying to do together.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I always refer to that as the worthy ideal. What is it that we're doing? What's the for the sake of what? So,
Yeah. There's a
and
lot of value in that.
there. Yeah, yeah, many. So I want to talk about your book a bit. And
Sure.
I've had an opportunity to peel back the covers, and I'm not going to divulge anything in the book because I want people to go get your book. And one of the things leaders listening to the podcast, you've heard me say this before, and if you've not, if this is your first episode, you'll hear me say it now. Always stay in the study, and we stay in the study. One of the best ways to stay in the study is reading, listening. So pick up a copy of Walker's book. And in the show notes will be Amazon links, and we don't share links here because I'm assuming you're driving in your car, and if you're driving in your car, don't try to write shit down. Focus on the road. So the book is the deal maker's will, and I have to tell you I'm really enjoying it. Um, just the bubble re-snapped around the name of the called the Go Giver, and I
Yeah.
love books that tell a story. And I don't know if you've ever read The Go Giver or not, but if you
I
haven't,
have.
all right, then I don't
Yeah,
have
it's a
to
good one.
I don't have to send you one. So when I'm reading your book, uh, that
Just send it. I'll re-gift it.
all right, there you go. I'll send.
Fair enough.
There you go. So just as I'm kind of reading your book and listening to the story and the conversations, and there's a wife in it, and there's all kinds of stuff that's going on, and it's a great read. And I think one of the things that I like about it is there are deep lessons in what you're teaching inside of the book. First thing is I want to ask you is why did you pick this format? What made you want to write a story? There's a lot of how-to books, Crossing the
Sure.
Chasm, Four Disciplines of Execution, Entrepreneurial. There's scale blitzing. There's all kinds of books out
Yeah.
there.
And
What
I
made
love
you
them
pick
all.
this? They're all great. Not to demean them. They're all great books. I'm in the
Right.
process
No,
of writing one myself. So,
look,
so
I will say I'm a voracious reader when it comes to nonfiction self-help books. I think my family makes fun of me for this. I just, I feel like if I'm reading anything else, I'm wasting my time. I have no idea where that comes from.
I'm
But,
with you.
and I have, man, I've read quite a few in the last decade or two.
Sure.
I would say the ones I really enjoyed always had, with rare exception, I mean, because sometimes it's just purely the facts, but the
Yeah.
ones I really enjoyed had either some parable, a lot of anecdotes, or just a full out story, because I'm a learner through story. Like it's hard for me to just grind through bullet points. But if you
Mhm.
can tell it to me in a story, in an anecdote, give me characters, I remember the important parts of that discussion, right? Maybe not line for line and I'm quoting it, but I get
Sure.
it. I can digest it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I wanted to write a story that I would want to read. And so this is absolutely a book about deal making, negotiating, not in the strategy tactical sense as much
Sure.
as it is in the human centered, what are we really trying to accomplish here? And what are the rules around how you can pull together a
Yeah.
deal of scale?
Yeah. It's I can see that. It's fun because I'll give a glimpse just for those of you who will get the book. I won't give away the theme of what's going on, but the book the it starts with what's going on in the room, what story was happening that in the very first few pages, what story is happening in the room, and what did you see and what did you miss? And
Right.
and not I don't know if you remember that or not in the book, but it's there.
Absolutely.
Um, but I love the kind of the idea behind that because I think one of the things that and I blame it on being an original Alabama boy. Sometimes I tend to my clients. I warn them all the time. Look, uh, I coach through parables, so just buckle up. When I go into a parable, go get a lunch, come back. It's all going to be fine. Um, but as you're going through that, I think it's one of the things I admire about the book that you've written and the direction that you've taken with it is the intention that you have to teach through the lesson and teach through stories, because it is something that people will retain, and it's worth the experience.
Well, thank you. What I did want to do is write a parable that was just obviously trying to teach a bullet pointed list, right? I really tried to approach it as a novel, a true story. And I don't mean true as in factual, but truly a story from beginning to end that wraps up just a single deal, and how humanized that really becomes at scale, and how much interaction that really takes, and how little pivots left or right or understanding the craft of deal making really either leads to success or early demise of the deal. and I mean, look, a lot of those lessons, and I don't think it gives it away much to say there's a mentor and there's a younger entrepreneur, and there's that relationship early. What his true intentions are a little murky, right? But I've had several mentors, right? Some that really took me under my wing. And I'll say in real estate, I had some I wouldn't call mentor. I learned some lessons from that taught me the hard way by leaving me with a deal where I made no money, right? I would say they were just as influential as characters in that book as the ones that took me under their wing. If you do it long enough, you're going to get taught some lessons. And what I try to do is just distill what are the important parts of that human-centered negotiation that happens when you're trying to put a multifaceted deal together.
Yeah. And I think that's the tenet behind it, I think is I really enjoy it, because, when you think about, as a leader inside of an organization, right? And talk about sales is always the underpinning. Deal making is constantly going on. Some kind of deal is happening somewhere, either in the body of your organization or with a vendor or with a client, or there's always something going on. And I like just love the way that you've approached that, because I think it's a great read for a leader to read, and then for a leader to pick up a handful of copies and hand them to their team.
I'll take it. That's what I was hoping to accomplish with the book. Really, it's an entertaining read.
Good.
And when you leave, you're like, okay, I learned something there. And look, that's not because I feel like I'm in the position to just impart knowledge. I learned some stuff writing it, because when you really have to distill if I can only put 7 rules together, what are they? Right. That was actually an interesting process for me, because what I may have written down first 2 years later, that rule book changed a little bit when I had time to really sit with it. So that was fun. And look, I'll still pick up the rules occasionally and look at it.
Yeah, it's fun. I personally appreciate that experience. It's hard. I think we could get into other quotes, Mark Twain and a bunch of other quotes about distilling stuff down, right? But no, but I think that's I think that's part of the art and nuance of really, truly leading people and creating something that creates an impact, is distilling it down to something that one is going to make sense. There's a law that I teach, and one of them is that clarity creates confidence. And so when you distill things down and it is clear, then you can automatically leave whatever conversation you're leaving or whatever you're doing with confidence. And I like that kind of that idea around, a leader picking up a copy of the book. And then I did this with all my teams for decades now. If I'm reading a book, they're reading a book. Some of them didn't like this. Some of them didn't appreciate that very much. Because I'd ask questions. So what did you think about? And so I would know where we were. But I think that's an important lesson. So leaders listening to the podcast, I'll encourage you to do that. Pick up a copy of the book and pick up a handful and give it to your team and have a conversation. Use it as a pivot point to have a conversation about what does this mean when you saw this in the book? Because they're going to have different perspectives than you.
Well, and I think that's what characters that you you really can elicit more conversation when you're speaking about actual people experiencing what those lessons or rules are, whether they're fictitious or not, right? In the context of a story, it is easier to have a conversation. It is just less academic, even though ultimately you're in the same place, right? Trying to understand what the truth of that conversation is.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, the way you put that, because it's, there are, having been I'm still consultant coach. I very rarely consult anymore. I just coach, which means I tell stories.
Right.
Most of the time, but it's fun because when you're doing academics, and to your point, they're great books. The books I mentioned earlier are amazing books. One of my favorite books is a book called The Road Less Stupid, which is about thinking time. I recommend it. But then I pull it off my shelf every now and then. But it's one thing when you're having that conversation around the mechanics of something, like if you're implementing, Gino Wickman's entrepreneurial operating system, or the Covey 4 disciplines of execution, or crossing the chasm, or, John Maxwell stuff.
Oh, this is great. We've read all the same stuff, right? I think you just hit most of my hit list. But you reminded me of something in that point.
What's that?
And it is sometimes, and I'm the world's worst at this. You're implementing whatever you're listening to or reading that second, right? Like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to do that. And then eventually you try to implement that in your own business. And sometimes you feel like, I got to have this like Swiss Army knife of strategies and tactics and gambits, like all at my fingertips at all times. And I just fundamentally believe that is a really tricky approach to encountering any kind of business. And it's, if you could kind of back away from it, depressurize it, look at it from 30,000 feet and just say, hey, look, no, fundamentally, the first thing we're going to do is kind of get on the same side of this equation. The world will be a lot easier than if you're stuck with 400 different strategies you're trying to employ at once. And I've been there. I mean, I know that feeling well. And it's taken some time to just say, hey, look, no, let's strip this down to its bare bones. Let's understand what we're trying to accomplish. And I think there's just there aren't 400 rules you need to be coming in with. There's a single digit number. I tried to capture the ones I thought were most important in the book. Right. And I'm sure if given to 10 other people, there would be some deviation of those rules, but simplifying that front end preparation is really key.
Yeah. I'm so with you on that. A decade and a half ago, I'm CEO of a marketing company. We're very successful. We're doing crazy, wacky stuff, doing stuff for Tony Robbins and Graziosi, doing wacky, crazy stuff. And I'm having a ball. And I come across a gentleman, and I won't mention his name by name, and he has a book about implementing an entrepreneurial operating system, and without giving Gino a plug. So I very promptly took that book and kind of went, God, this is really good. Walked in and told my team, we're going to do all the stuff that we're doing. We're going to take this and I'm going to throw this right over the top of it. And this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to follow all these principles, damn the torpedoes kind of an approach. Got a little overexcited and promptly blew my company. Just promptly blew it all the hell and back. And because when you lose track of that thing that you're talking about in the very beginning, which is that, what is it that we're trying to do? Let's clearly identify that. And there may be a lot of different pieces out there that you can apply, but when you forget that piece or set it aside inside of the body of your company, you will suffer the consequences. And it took us a while to recover, a little bit, about $1 million.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. That's a fair statement. And I think that's one every entrepreneur, leader, manager struggles with, is spending enough time painting that picture of where we're headed. I know I do, right? And I tell myself, even though I make notes to do it, that's oftentimes I'm trying to get right underneath it, get into the strategy. How are we really blocking and tackling this equation instead of really starting at 30,000 feet, whether it's internal to the team or external with a bigger team, and saying, hey, this is how I see us doing X in the future together. Right.
Yeah.
That is such a critical part of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. So we're, I've lost track of time. We're wandered off in Zoom. I don't know how long we've been here, about an hour or so, give or take a nickel. But so I want to come back to the book for just a couple of
Sure.
minutes. And you touched on it, and I don't want to lose track of this before we wrap up the podcast. And everybody, when we write books, we write them with an intention. And intention can be many things. One of the things I loved in the front of your book was there was a list of people that the book was dedicated to. And, which touches me, I'm an old-fashioned dad, right? I carry a thing on my wrist that says family on the back of my hand all the time.
There you go.
So I want to just kind of talk about, your intention. And you mentioned earlier that this was a labor of love, I think were the words that you used, the three words that you used. So kind of your intention, why you did this, and then what you would really like to see happen from the book. What do you want to see happen?
Somebody asked me, who are you writing this for? Somewhere in the middle, right? When I was getting up early in the morning and trying to, knock out a chapter before work. And I would say this one's crystal clear to me. And I wrote this book for me 10 years ago, right? Like, I wish I would have had this book. Had I read it, I would have skipped some steps. And those were costly steps. Let's say 10 to 15 years ago. That kind of entrepreneurial spirit, I think that's kind of woven through the book, is something I identify with. And you just can't have all the lessons in your 20s and even early 30s. Like, you're going through the paces and you're learning constantly. I'm still learning. Every time I do a deal, I'm learning something. But it really was written, in effect, I'm looking in the mirror saying, boy, I wish I could travel back in time and read this story, and it would change my outlook on exactly, the little fringes around what I'm trying to build here and what we're doing. And it's very much geared to the deal making aspect of it. That's what the rules, the 7 rules woven through the book are for. Right. But you could almost back up and say, hey, you could apply that to building a business. You could apply that to building a team. You can apply a lot of the lessons to how you would manage that team. But it's not written for everyone. It's written for somebody with an entrepreneurial spirit who likes the story.
Yeah, I like that. I think I like that. I like that why, kind of the why behind it. And I have to smile when you say, yeah, those early mornings where we get up and do that stuff before the white noise catches up with us for the rest of the day. So when
I can't do it late.
No, 72. I'm past 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, I'm out, or worthless. I'm doing other things. So those who pick up the book, what is your hope, your intent that they come away with? What are you looking for them? What are you changing?
Oh, I would, in a few sentences, I hope that if you read the book, whatever the deal in front of you is, becomes just a little less complicated. Like, I think as entrepreneurs, we are good at complicating what's important, and having, like you said, Gino Wickman's strategy, and that's a great one, and it works across the board for several companies. But it's like, oh, I got to do that tomorrow, and I got to do all this, and then I got another strategy, I got to work. And like I said, whatever you're reading tomorrow becomes more important. I think this is a good book for maybe taking a breath and saying, okay, if I'm looking at what's exactly in front of me, and I simplify this with a simple set of rules, and this is the map by which I tackle that project, I think you'll find it's less complicated.
Good. I like that. I think I think a lot of
And you
times
may make some friends
you never know,
rather
right?
than enemies. You may make a few friends along the way if you tackle the projects with that set of rules.
Yeah, you just never know. It's funny because there are those people follow you for the rest of your life. I have friends for decades because of those kinds of things. So a couple of things. I've yet after tens and tens and tens of episodes figured out how to do an elegant ending in a podcast. So we've been together way past the time I promised we would be together. Um, so a couple things. I want to encourage the listeners on the podcast to pick up a copy of the book. It's called The Dealmaker's Will. The links, the Amazon links will be in the notes. It'll be in all of the stuff. On my website, on the nextinterview.com website, there's a guests page, and it'll also be there as well. So if you can't find it in the show notes, go to the website, go to the guests, look for Walker, and you'll be able to find all the information there, including a beautiful picture of him on the website there. So kind of and do pick up a copy. And I love one of the things you talked about. I want to reemphasize something that you said, which is the number of books that you've read over a period of time. And staying in the study, I think, is critically important. There's all kinds of metaphors for people for that. And I love the fact when you can put a book in your hand and you've got the paper and you can turn the paper. Of course, I'm old. I tend to resonate with that more than a Kindle.
I do the same. It's fair. Now I'll listen, but I'm a paperback kind of guy.
Yeah, me too. I listen every now and then. My boys give me grief for that, but Dad, you could hear it on Audible. It's not the same. It's just not the same to me. So I want to close the podcast out with a couple things. The very first thing is we open with gratitude. I close every podcast with gratitude. So I think that there's been some very interesting insights that you've talked about here on the podcast, and in particular with building teams and people and how you treat people with respect. I love your story about stepping into the meeting with a consultant who's going to dice the numbers with you. And rather than being dismissive and taking a defensive stance, you brought her into the conversation. So I want to extend gratitude to you for the wisdom and insights that you've given. I'm going to encourage listeners to go back and listen to the podcast again. You may not listen to all of it, but there'll be key moments in the show notes that I think you should go listen to. So go listen to those moments. And so thank you for being here, man. Thank you.
Well, look, I want to say I really appreciated the time. This is fun, and it's a good escape for me to just sit and talk about business rather than constantly staring at my computer screen. So I had a blast. I'll do it anytime you want.
Good. Thank you, man. That's my goal. If it's not fun, we shouldn't be here. So
there you go.
All right. So in closing the podcast, two things every time. The first thing is the podcast is on every platform known to man. It's on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, YouTube, Audible. It's all over the place. But go to your favorite source and give the podcast a no, like, share, or follow. They're all different depending upon the platform. It has nothing to do with creating a vanity number. It has to do with how technology works, and it elevates the podcast so that it becomes more visible. And the reason we want it to be more visible is so that we can empower other people. So if you know a leader or another individual who can learn from any of the concepts or topics that Walker talked about today, share this podcast with them. And about 2 months from now, after you listen to the podcast, go listen to it again, because you'll pick up things you didn't hear the first time. So listen to the content. That's my request to you. So I look forward to it. Make sure you share the podcast. I'm Doland White. I'm the host of the Next Interview Show. My guest, Walker Thrash. Thank you for being here, taking time. And
thanks a bunch, Doland. Enjoyed it.
We're at. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Next Interview Show. If today's conversation gave you something to think about or something to act on, follow the show. And share this episode with a leader you know who's ready to step up, because empowered leadership isn't a solo sport.